Hi Beats, it's EKG. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Ebony and I hope you are doing well. Hope you're taking care of yourself. And today I am doing a video in which I do book recommendations based on albums. I have done some other videos like this in the past featuring artists like Frank Ocean, SZA, but today I thought I'd broaden the scope, vibe out, jam out to some new artists and compare the works to works of literature. So the first artist I'm going to be featuring today is FKA Twigs, and I'm going to be talking about her album Magdalene. And Magdalene title tells you that FKA Twigs chooses to go into detail about religion, specifically a religious figure, Mary Magdalene, in the Bible, who was one of Jesus's closest confidants outside of his disciples. And FKA Twigs is fascinated by the representation of a woman who she considers to be equal to Jesus Christ and who he regards to on a high standard. Not only that, FKA Twigs also talks about relationships, tumultuous relationships, as well as her own struggles with anxiety, depression, feeling lonely. So based on the overall themes of Magdalene, I'm first going to recommend you Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. Gia Tolentino has an essay in here that focuses on the literary heroine's journey from brave to blank to bitter, it says on the back. That specific theme ties into FKA Twigs' Magdalene, where FKA Twigs is fascinated by Mary Magdalene, and specifically she's interested in why people assume that Mary Magdalene may have been a lover of Jesus Christ when it's known that Jesus did not partake in the human flesh. And she talks about how, as a feminist, that bothers her because it's a take on why can't powerful women stand as an equal to a powerful man and not subject themselves to being involved in a romantic relationship with said man. So I think Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino will explore parts of that phenomenon, specifically in pop culture, in media, and in literature. The next collection that I want to recommend based off of Magdalene is Ariel by Sylvia Plath. But in specifically, I want to recommend the poem Lady Lazarus. Is Sylvia Plath's more well-known poems, and it deals with themes of religion and being a powerful, strong woman. One of the most iconic lines from Lady Lazarus, the most potent stanza, is "Out of the ash I rise with my red hair and I eat men like air." Lady Lazarus. And I wanted to mention Lazarus because Lazarus is a figure in the Bible whom Jesus performs a miracle on. Lazarus was dead for a few days and Jesus decides to resurrect him from the dead. In a way, Sylvia Plath is reimagining this telling of Lazarus, but as a strong, powerful woman in the imagery of a phoenix, which is also very religious and spiritual, rising up and separating herself and progressing without men and without needing men. And lastly, the final book I want to recommend based on Magdalene is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. Conversations with Friends follows our main character Frances, and she is an aspiring poet, writer, who is a 20-something living in Dublin, and she becomes involved in a relationship with a married man. But more specifically, I believe that if you love Magdalene, you would love Conversations with Friends, because Sally Rooney in this novel talks quite a bit about religion in women's bodies and how she reflects and uses imagery, for example, of a woman's period. She uses that and equates it to the suffering that Jesus went through, or the suffering that is talked about in the Bible. So once again, I'm hitting on the themes of religion, but then also FKA Twigs explores toxic relationships or relationships that just don't necessarily serve you. And we all know Sally Rooney is the queen of writing relationships and just not hiding away from fully displaying the wide range of emotions and stages that relationships can be in. So I highly recommend Conversations with Friends if you love Magdalene. So the next album I'm going to be talking about is The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. This album is beyond iconic, and let me explain to you why. If you're unfamiliar, Lauryn Hill was a part of a group called the Fugees, and they were coming up in like the 1990s, and at the time in hip-hop, women were viewed through a misogynistic lens. But Lauryn Hill comes in and she creates an album that goes into detail about love. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is about how Lauryn Hill and children and the youth have a false sense of identity and a sense of what it means to love and be loved, and why and how that happens through the media, through socioeconomic status. And that's really fascinating to me. So based off of that information, the first book I want to recommend to you is All About Love by Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks is a feminist icon. So we are following a theme, and she radicalizes love and further delves into the many ways in which people can love and express themselves. Hey, Editing Ebony here, and I also wanted to mention how, I don't know where my mind was in this clip, but Bell Hooks uses love as a way to encourage people to come together and to be unified, and that's exactly Lauryn Hill's message in The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Love is not only something that you express physically, but it is something that you use to empathize with people and to encourage a sense of unity in a nation. And if you know Lauryn Hill, we're all about unifying peace and love and bringing together the community to better serve the world and to come together and work together. So that's why I wanted to mention All About Love by Bell Hooks. Thanks! I highly recommend All About Love by Bell Hooks. I want to recommend Their Eyes Were Watching God. This is by Zora Neale Hurston. And this follows our main character, Janie Crawford. Janie saw her life like a great tree in leaf, with the things suffered, things enjoyed, things done and undone. Dawn and doom was in the branches. So Lauryn Hill really encompasses all of these themes that Zora Neale Hurston hits on in Their Eyes Were Watching God. From what I understand, just a little disclaimer, I have not yet read this book, but I mean, I've heard nothing but amazing things. It's a modern classic, so. Up next, a book I have read and want to recommend to you is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This follows two half-sisters from their beginning in Africa before slavery, and it follows their families' genealogies. One of the sisters' lineages gets sold into slavery, and so then you see them establish life as a Black American, and the other side stays in Ghana, and you see how they also survived in a post-transatlantic slave trade, how generational trauma impacts families. I think that is a good parallel to draw between Yaa Gyasi's Homecoming as well as Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Up next, I'm probably going to talk about one of my favorite albums of all time. I'm such a huge fan of this album. I am a stan, and that is Damn by Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar won a Pulitzer Prize as a hip-hop artist, and that has literally never been happened before. Wow! And that has literally never happened before. And when I say this man is a genius, he is a genius. Damn also uses a lot of religious imagery, life and death, as well as temptation. A lot of the songs on the album are named after the 7 deadly sins. So based on that, I think a really fascinating book that also explores temptation, but from the tempter side. C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Who am I recommending a classic? Essentially, Screwtape Letters is about Screwtape. He is writing advice to a younger tempter, and yes, he may or may not work for the devil, acting as a mentor for a younger tempter, and the younger tempter is trying to sway and trying to convince human that he's assigned to commit sins. And I for sure see Kendrick Lamar exploring temptation as well as giving in to like fleshly or worldly pleasures. Throughout the entire album of Damn, he actually has people saying, "Ain't nobody praying for me." So he's going on his own spiritual journey, and I think Screwtape Letters is a good reflection of that. Another book that I want to mention that I don't physically have with me is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think Between the World and Me and Damn go hand in hand. Kendrick Lamar is unafraid to show and highlight parts of his upbringing, and Between the World and Me explores that, as well as exploring blackness in media, which is what Kendrick Lamar puts on a pedestal through his albums. Ta-Nehisi Coates and Kendrick Lamar argue basically the same things through their books, and they express it in very interesting, dynamic ways. And lastly, I'm gonna hit you guys with some poetry rec, a poetry rec, and that is Finna by Nate Marshall. Finna by Nate Marshall explores Black vernacular like AAVE, just Black culture, Black American culture, and how resilient it is, specifically through using the setting of Chicago. And then Kendrick also muses on Compton and how that has shaped his upbringing. Okay, up next, I'm going to talk about Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon. Kid Cudi's album, Man on the Moon, is really an exploration into Kid Cudi's psyche, into his loneliness, depression, how he copes with that in ways like through drug use and things of that nature. So based on that, I have to admit this album was a little harder for me to find book recommendations on that weren't poetry. So if you're a poetry lover, stay tuned. But first I'll start with the non-poetry book, and that is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Paul is also very obsessed with the human psyche. This is a memoir that details Paul's journey from basically being an undergraduate trying to figure out what he wants to do next, to going to get his master's in English and loving writing, and then deciding he wants to become a neurosurgeon. And then he is diagnosed with a condition that alters his life. But within this narrative, Paul really explores the human psyche both physically and metaphysically, and he is very fascinated by philosophy. And I believe those themes relate very well to Man on the Moon by Kid Cudi. Next, I want to recommend 3 poetry collections to you guys. Here they are. The first one being Dreamwork by Mary Oliver. If I could summarize Kid Cudi's lyrics, his overall vibe for the album, it definitely feels as though he is in a dream, altered state. And that is what Dreamwork is by Mary Oliver. She also contemplates a lot about the human psyche, what it means to be an artist, as well as an artist dealing with mental illness, which Kid Cudi also hits on. I want to mention Sweet Dark by Savannah Brown. This is one of my favorite poetry collections. Actually, Dreamwork by Mary Oliver and Sweet Dark are both on my favorite poetry collections list. Sweet Dark by Savannah Brown uses a lot of imagery with planets, the moon, the sun, Man on the Moon. Sweet Dark explores the transience of existence, the pursuit of vulnerability, pleasure, chaos, and the dichotomy of a life wholly experienced, full of so much darkness and so much sweetness, sometimes in the same breath. And I believe that's what Kid Cudi encompasses. And lastly, I'm really hitting on the space themes here because, you know me, I am a lover of all things alien. And that is Space Struck by Paige Lewis. This is also a poetry collection. It leads to an exploration to the stars and back, begging us to reconsider our boundaries of self, time, space, and knowledge. The speaker writes in one of the poems, "The universe is an arrow without end, and it asks only one question: how dare you?" So if you want to get into the more philosophical side of Kid Cudi's album, then I highly recommend Space Truck by Paige Lewis. It also uses obviously a lot of imagery of outer space and equating the existentialist aspects of realizing that you are probably a little speck in an infinitely vast universe and dealing with that. The final album I will be talking about today is Kehlani's It Was Good Until It Wasn't. This album came out, I believe, in 2020. Kehlani's album explores connection. Connection, the lack of connection, how that impacts our relationships, how that impacts our world. Based on that, something that gives me a similar vibe to that would definitely be Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. And Beautiful World, Where Are You, 2 main characters, Eileen and Alice, respond mainly through email correspondence. So Sally Rooney explored human connection as well, whether it be physically or through technology, and how miscommunications can arise from expressions. And then we also get insight into Eileen and Alice's personal love lives with opposing male characters, Simon and Felix. I feel as though Kehlani is very known for discussing relationships in her music. Definitely check out Beautiful World, Where Are You if you liked It Was Good Until It Wasn't. And then lastly, just once again hitting more on the vein of Kehlani saying why she wanted to still come out with her album during Panoramic. I want to mention a collection of short essays, Intimations by Zadie Smith. Specifically, one essay in here that has stuck with me since I read it is Something to Do. The ending, which says, watching this manic desire to make or grow or do something that now seems to be consuming everybody, I do feel comforted to discover I'm not the only person on this earth who has no idea what life is for, nor what it is to be done with all this time aside from feeling it. So in this essay, she talks about like how we were all faced with time. We all had this time to really sit and reflect on our lives and see how our relationships that we're in are serving us, what could be better, how can we be better, as well as getting in touch with our hobbies and things of that nature. I remember Kehlani speaking about It Was Good Until It Wasn't and why that aspect of time was important to her in creating this album, and how she wanted to further dive into human connection, whether that be with our own selves and our own psyche, as well as those around us and our world. So thank you so much for vibing out with me today to these musicians and for listening to my book recommendations. If you want to see more videos like this, I will leave it linked in the card so you can check them out. All of my social medias are linked down below as well. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!
And I was like, yo.